Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Thursday, June 20th, 2024. The calendar, which omitted telling us that it was Juneteenth yesterday, does have a notation that it is the first day of summer. I guess today's the summer solstice. Does it alternate ever? Does it ever fall on the 21st rather than the 20th? I just have some vague memory of that being the case, and not enough calendars on hand to check it out. And it only just occurred to me, so I haven't Googled it yet. So maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. All right, well, time for another show, regardless of what day it is. And I can't tell. All I know is it's the solstice because they have lit up Stonehenge in festive holiday colors for the occasion. Well, no. Okay, what actually happened was something that set the world on its ear yesterday, except really didn't, but I don't know. Some oil protesters, that is to say, protesters from a group that calls itself, I believe, Just Stop Oil. Like, why don't you just do that? It actually is kind of a manifestation of why don't you justism, which I'm never particularly enamored of. But anyway, yes, climate protesters and oil consumption protesters, and everybody knows that ought to be, we ought to have our consciousness raised about it. But they selected something that I think probably irritated more people than converted them to the cause. They decided to, well, I guess to be perfectly accurate about it, douse some of the stones in Stonehenge in a, I think, water-soluble, dry pigment powder composed of cornstarch and food coloring, such that it would not supposedly do any permanent damage to the stones. I don't know. Sounds like it. Their plan is that it would just wash away in the rain. But in the meantime, everybody got upset and angry. It looks very much like orange spray paint, and that it's defaced this international, I don't know what you would call it. I mean, just in terms of targets, like untouchable targets for damage in pursuit of protest, Stonehenge is right up there with, I don't know, like the Great Pyramids. I think blowing up the Great Pyramids would still be the untoppable offense against humanity. But this is pretty high ranking. But of course, hopefully this doesn't do any actual lasting damage to the stones. And then there was debate all day long about, well, what about the effectiveness of the protest? On the one hand, everybody's talking about it. On the other hand, everybody's talking about how dumb these people were. So I don't know. You'll have to evaluate it for yourself. Anyway, we know it's the solstice, and we know that because Stonehenge. I was just sort of wondering yesterday, by the way, who's happy about that? I guess there are climate protesters who are happy about raising the profile of the issue, but is anybody happy about, like, what happened to Stonehenge? Is there anybody out there? I wondered, just casually, is there anyone in the world who would be able to kind of get away with, or no one would look twice if they said, good, F Stonehenge, I hate it anyway. Couldn't happen to a dumber monument. I was just wondering who might be able to. And it occurred to me that the current Republican nominee for President of the United States of America would probably be able to get away with such a comment. I don't know that he would make such a comment. It would be seen as too supportive of people who, people with whose agenda he disagrees vehemently. But I don't know if it had been done in support of MAGA somehow, or if they had spray painted an M and an A and a G and an A on the stones. Probably would have said, to hell with Stonehenge anyway. Who even needs it? And anybody else says that, oh my God, that person is a psychopath. And this would also mean that Trump was a psychopath, but we already know that he is. But I'm just thinking about the way the news media works in the country. We'd just be like, it's Trump being Trump. What can I tell you? Hey, the guy hates stones. It's just part of his psyche. He always says something that he chokes like a dog, and he's a germaphobe, and he hates henges. It's just Trump. And we just let that roll off our backs. Like, that's a weird thing to say. Anybody else would be like, why do you hate, world heritage? Anyway, the point is, the protest work. I'm never buying oil from Druids again. And everybody should splash paint on anything over 3,000 years old and expect to get good results, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, not where I meant to spend the morning. There's lots of other things happening. That's why Greg Dworkin is here, and that's probably why he called in. Emergency! He's ignoring the news. Good morning, Greg. How are you doing?
Good morning. I take the opposite approach to what you just said.
Okay.
Like, unlike, let's say, a stupid protest that gets everybody angry with you, like throwing tomato soup on the Mona Lisa or its equivalent.
Right. Okay.
This is not only stupid,
Aha.
not only incomprehensible that somebody would try to deface a monument to human achievement that's thousands of years old and has achieved much more than you will ever do with your stupid protest, but you'll upset the Druids and probably get yourself cursed and enchanted. I mean, what's the point?
That's not super smart. They will, by the way,
they'll throw you over the bridge and
they will murder a guy and put you in a bog. I mean, that's a historical record.
Right.
We'll be looking at your mummy in 3,000
That's just
years.
a fact.
All right. Well, hopefully they escape that fate, and the Druids concentrate on whatever, harvesting of mistletoe, whatever might be otherwise occupying them. Look, I hope it comes away as promised. I mean, I don't think these guys are chemical scientists or anything, so they say it'll wash away, but I don't know.
Having
Do
been
they know
there, I
anything?
just don't get it. And
No,
I was
I don't
pleased
think
to see
anybody
a
gets
lot of the tourists who were there just tried to stop them.
Yeah. Well, it's annoying and upsetting. Hopefully, if it all washes away without any damage, the tourists have a weird memory that's sort of unique at best. But yeah, I think most of the world was pretty annoyed by that, and lots of people suggesting, sure, I'm right with you with the protest, but maybe orange pigment on an oil executive, perhaps, or a building where they actually do these things.
My feeling about this is, what the hell is wrong with you, you stupid git? Which is what they'd say to you if you were there.
I guess so. So anyway, it captured the attention of the world for being stupid. So
yeah, okay,
all right.
So you convinced nobody and got a lot of people anti your cause.
Right, and I don't know who splashed that stuff on Donald Trump's face, but if I catch you, I'll probably take you out to dinner. But
so
orange
a couple
is
of things. I was interested in some of the stuff we talked about yesterday. There were all sorts of tributes to Willie
Glad
Mays.
to hear that.
And they were all wonderful because he was wonderful.
Right. No one's splashing paint on him, thank you.
Yeah. I hadn't realized he started in the Negro Leagues. That's how far back he goes. As a teenager, he played on weekends when school was in and all week when school was out.
Yes. Okay. I got you. Right. Well, that's because he had to go to school.
He had to go to school.
Right.
And he was just a nice guy. And so, true to his roots, back in New York, he'd play stickball with the kids and then take them out for ice cream.
Hey, that's nice. Joe Biden should do that.
Everything about Willie Mays was good. Oh, by the way, his talent was incredible, but everything about the person was good.
Well, that's nice. I wish that was true of more people. Me, for instance. I would love that.
I wish it were true everywhere. Yeah, take somebody out to ice cream.
Why not?
Take Uncle Joe out to ice cream. He likes it.
Yeah. Okay.
Usually vanilla. So the other thing, of course, we didn't talk about enough because nobody could talk about it enough, although it happens every year, was Juneteenth being yesterday. Andrea Junker had this nice thing to say about it, so I thought I'd quote her.
Let's do that.
On Twitter, she says, Juneteenth is the perfect moment to remind everybody of two facts. Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and those who prevent history from being taught are planning to repeat it.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point.
So, Loudoun County, pay attention.
Yes. However, we have, like others, weirdos who want things not to be taught. However, the actual population of Loudoun County says, "Oh, actually, you should F right off with that."
Right, and it's good. Loudoun County is a plus in that regard. There are places that are not like that who let the MAGA school board people in. Even in Newtown, somebody tried to ban some book. Didn't work. I mean, I get that. I understand what you're saying, but it's upsetting that people would even try.
Yeah,
or they would think that they have enough support to try.
Well, people try all sorts of things. They throw
shouldn't.
Orange tang on.
That's exactly right. It's as stupid as the people throwing orange paint on the.
They should use tang
Stonehenge
for that. Honestly, not only would it wash away in rain, but it would be delicious and nutritious when it did.
Speaking of stupid, I mentioned Patrick Healy yesterday.
Did you?
Yeah,
Okay.
I said he had a stupid article saying the election is slipping away, and I couldn't even imagine why he would say that when everything is tied.
Okay.
And then I said, I really hadn't read the article yet because it's Patrick Healy, and God, who wants to read Patrick Healy? So because I said that yesterday, I felt obligated to your listeners to read the article, and God, is it stupid. I was right.
It's like throwing orange paint on your brain.
His position is Biden isn't gaining in the polls, therefore he's losing. Right? He was tied before, he's tied now, completely wasted spring, and therefore that's why the election is slipping away.
Nothing is happening. Therefore,
I get the
something
thesis
is happening.
that you should be ahead by more, as somebody pointed out on Twitter. He should be ahead by 34 points, Biden should be, one for every felony conviction. But
true, right.
That's not how it works, number one.
No, they're selling "I'm voting for a convicted felon" T-shirts.
Right. And number two, it's June.
Yes.
It's not September. And so the idea that anything that happens now is definitive for September, October, November is just ridiculous. Dumb, stupid.
Right. Though September's another good time to throw things on Stonehenge.
So let me point out a couple of things that just poke holes in the Patrick Healy thesis. All right. Okay. First of all, Biden made a big move, which has been done relatively quietly. I mean, they covered it like a one-liner in the news, but it's a big deal. Making moves to offer citizenship status to spouses of people already here in the United States. And, of course, that it was effective because Fox News was really upset about it and tried to pivot to, this is all about the border and the weakened border, when, in fact, this is about people. That's like talking about dreamers. They're already here.
Right.
They're in the United States. So any mention of the border is you trying to distract from what's going on.
Yeah, you're pointing the camera away from the subject.
Yeah, exactly. Greg Sargent has a piece. Fox News' ugly eruption over Biden immigration move has a hidden tell. His executive action is actually about people who live and have roots here. Right-wingers know they can't win if the debate is about those folks because they're, sympathetic. They're Americans. So they scream, border, border, look over here, look up caravans. We've seen that move.
Yeah. A lot of the people screaming are in some cases married to people who will get these green cards.
Right.
They just
so
think everybody else
is
bad.
A deeper dive into that.
All right.
Before we get to the Fox News poll, which was incredibly positive for Biden, but we'll get to that.
No.
The Fox News' ugly eruption over Biden immigration move has a hidden tell. And in fact, here's a piece from Axios. With the descriptions of the two Latino outreach programs. Latino voting right now is favoring Trump over Biden in ways that didn't happen 4 years ago or 8 years ago.
Okay.
And I want to just give you that and then talk about Mike Madrid. So Axios says, what we're watching, Biden's move this week to grant protection to 500,000 undocumented people with citizen spouses could move the needle among Latino voters per this poll that they did. Equus with Target Smart, 72% of Latinos in the survey who said they do not currently support Biden said they would be more likely to vote for him if he put a program in place like this. Well, he just put a program in place like this.
Well, now they have to find out about it.
Now they have to find out about it. Exactly right. And that's one of the reasons why you can't look at polls and say, oh, well, the polls say. So Mike Madrid is a former chief of the Republican Party in California, an ex-Republican, a never-Trumper, and has always interesting analysis on both Republicans and Democrats because of his point of view. And he gave an interview with Washington Monthly. And the first question to him is, we've had some time now since the Trump guilty verdict. What are you seeing in the poll? And Madrid says, look, Trump consistently lost 18 to 21% of Republicans from New Hampshire through New Mexico. And that's a shockingly high number for any nominee. He's talking about what we've talked about, the Haley voter in the primaries.
Okay.
Remember, 4 years ago, Trump lost re-election as an incumbent with 8% of Republicans defecting. And right now he's consistently polling 3 times that number. So the real question is what's likely to happen with the differential between the 8% he lost in 2020 and the 18% he's losing now? Who are these new 10 to 12% of Republicans who have had it, and what do they do after the convictions?
Okay.
Right? So there's been no change in the number of Republicans who are literally getting off the couch on a Tuesday night, driving down to the high school gym to vote for a candidate who dropped out 2 months ago. It's Nikki Haley. That's a very, very intense sign of opposition. Even though there seems to be some polling tightening, it's not nearly enough to fix the problem. So Trump and Biden have very different problems.
Okay.
Trump has an election day problem that's not showing up in the polling. Biden has a polling problem that's not showing up on election day.
I say, oh, okay. Well, that would be polar opposites then.
Right? If you have to choose between him, Biden.
Okay.
There's no question it remains a very significant problem for Trump that not enough Republicans are coming back to support the nominee. Can it be fixed? Yeah. But in the middle of June, with 20% of your base saying they're not with you, is a 5-alarm problem. Then Washington Monthly asks him about this border security move. And remember, Mike Madrid is looking at this from a Republican perspective, and he basically says it's about time.
Mm-hmm.
The Democratic Party has to get away from ethnic identity headlocks, where they think that all they have to do to recruit Latinos in elections is to do Spanish ads and say we're going to do something about immigration. Most Latinos do not have that as their major interest.
Okay.
What they have as their major interest is what every American has as their major interest.
Traffic.
Whatever it is. If you live in Virginia, it's
Yeah.
going to be traffic in
right.
Northern Virginia. If it's going to be
Are there other people?
somewhere else, it's going to be the economy. It's going to be democracy. More about that from the Fox poll in a minute. And so concentrating on immigration only is not it.
Stonehenge, right?
However, as the Axios poll shows, what Latino voters would love is some balance. So that's why we talked about yesterday, the two-step that Biden did. First, you close the border with an executive order. Then you offer citizenship to spouses of citizens as the other step. Is a balanced approach and something you can sell. And so if you talk about, well, where is the Latino outreach? Well, first you put the substance in place, then you do the outreach.
It's a fine plan to have something to talk to people about.
So how are
reach out.
Republicans doing? And Madrid says, well, at the moment, Republicans are winning the vote, whatever vote they get, despite their efforts, not because of them. They have basically terrible Latino outreach.
Yeah,
and
imagine
Washington Monthly says, well, you think Democrats would counter this lie by going back to what Carville said when he was running Bill Clinton's campaign? Is the economy stupid? And he said, yep, 100%. These are working class issues. This is a working class approach. You shouldn't take it as a Latino approach. You should take it as an American working class approach and approach it that way rather than focusing on immigration and Spanish language ads.
Although you could say it's the economy stupid in Spanish. That would be
you'd need
applicable.
to.
And
of course, he also points out that the Latino population is not monolithic, and what you need in Arizona might be a little different than what you need in Nevada, and that might be a little bit different than what you need in Pennsylvania.
Yes, I can imagine so.
So same with Texas. But Biden's stepping up Hispanic outreach, according to that Axios article about their poll, particularly in key states like Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia. And the Trump campaign announced this month it's creating Latino Americans for Trump, a coalition with notable members of Latino communities from across the country. In other words, this is basically the difference between the campaigns. The Trump campaign is all style, no substance. And the Biden campaign is all substance, and they need a little bit more style.
I see. Okay.
So we'll see where that goes. And here's where you cue the Fox News poll just out after reading Patrick Healy's stupid argument. Fox News poll, 7-point swing to Biden from March to June in the Fox News polling, whereas it's been months and months and months. I mean, something, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's been 6 months since Biden led 49-48 in a Fox News poll. And Fox News polls, by the way, are very good. They're done by a Democrat and a Republican. They're not slanted just because it's Fox News.
Fox News is bad. Polls are good.
Fox News polls are good.
Okay.
Trump has been hitting consistently 50% since that time. Now Biden is ahead 50-48. And I sent you the graph so you could see it there. Their story isn't about the shift since March. It's about the shift since May, 3-point shift in Biden-Trump matchup since May. 32% give the economy positive marks, a record high during Biden's presidency.
Okay.
Okay, and this also extends to the expanded ballot. If you include Robert F. Kennedy, Jill Stein, and Cornel West, Stein and West are both stuck at 2%. And Kennedy's dropped from 15% in November of 2023 to 10% now, and he'll continue to drop because third-party candidates always drop, and nobody knows who he is. I mean, they recognize the name, but once you find out he's a complete nut job, he'll drop even more. So I'm not in the least bit worried about him. And it doesn't affect Biden's lead.
Okay.
Right. He leads, with or without the 5-way hypothetical presidential race. And that's what's going to happen in November. And that's what almost always happens to third-party candidates.
All right. I can understand that. Historical trend, and nothing looks to be disrupting that. No breakout third-party
because
candidates.
Kennedy isn't even clearly on the ballot in all the states. So
he's not clearly
a lot of other stuff
all
going
there.
On. And that's the difference between style and substance in a campaign. Fox News write-up also says there's also a 4-point shift in the expanded ballot. While other potential candidates are included, Biden tops Trump by 1 point. Kennedy receives 10. Cornel West and Jill Stein get 2 each. Last month, Trump was ahead of Biden by 3 points, so that's a shift. Now, it's interesting. Biden receives a backing of 73% of black voters. That's below the 79 he had before the 2020 election when he went on to win blacks with 91% support. So the polls said in 2020 that Biden had 79% support. Then you go to the actual poll, the election day.
Yeah, all right.
And Biden wins 91 support. That's why Mike Madrid said Biden has a polling problem that doesn't show up on election day.
Yeah, I mean,
whereas Trump has a election day problem that's not showing up in the polls.
Hey, who are the people that take the time to answer a poll?
Pretty on target there.
All right. Yeah, I mean, it's an odd thing to think about, the idea of, well, I don't know, we answered polls and 79%, well, that's a vast majority. It's not 90%. Who's answering polls, bothering to answer polls, but not bothering to vote? I don't know. Some of it has just got to be shift in approach and just, I want to.
On your cell phone.
Yeah. And then, look, I'm not sold. I'm not enamored necessarily. I'm going to vote for him. But let's keep him working through the election period to see what else he'll promise, essentially.
My point of view on that, until proven otherwise, is that if somebody calls you and you pick up a landline and you say you're voting for somebody and that you mean to vote,
do that for?
You're going to vote for that person and you are, in fact, going to vote.
Okay.
Whereas if somebody says that on a cell phone, they may have just either hit the button while they were trying to avoid the car trying to hit him in the crosswalk, or I don't know.
Prank caller. I don't know. I'm not certain.
That was a butt dial poll.
I get that is possible, especially if it's a press one for something.
Here's an example.
Is that how you respond?
3/4 of voters in the Fox News poll say it matters a great deal to them who wins the presidential election. They favor Biden over Trump by 5 points.
Okay.
In other words, people who pay attention and know what's going on.
I don't care. I'm for Trump. That's got to be it.
By 5 points.
Okay.
More women than men feel the outcome matters a great deal, and more voters age 65 plus than young voters feel like it matters a great deal.
Sure.
Okay, and that could be a big help for Biden if it holds, because those folks show up.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
Many of them have nothing else to do.
While it's too early to look at results among likely voters, they look anyway.
All right. This should not be done. However,
and I'm not even going to report that because
it's
stupid and they shouldn't look.
Okay. That's good. That's a good edit then.
Among double haters, those having an unfavorable view of Biden and Trump, Biden is ahead by 11 points in the two-way. They go for Kennedy, 35, Biden, 27, and Trump, 21 in the five-way. That's important. Kennedy's not getting 35% of those voters in the end.
Well,
as he fades, they're going to have to reluctantly make a choice. And the choice they're reluctantly going to make is going to be Biden. Again, another reason why Trump has an election day problem that isn't showing up in the polls.
Okay. Double haters. By the way, don't forget that there are double haters like me. I double hate Trump.
Yeah.
But I'm going to vote. But I am a double hater. I hate him twice
You know,
as much
they
as
never
most people.
polled a double secret probation.
It's secret.
Yeah.
And, you can't. But, however, we can. Jim Jordan will subpoena your probation papers and hold in contempt any official who doesn't reveal the secret of your probation.
Right.
So
is the race
doomed.
more about the candidate or the issue?
The
59 to
issue of the
29% margin, voters say it's about the issues. They're lying to the pollsters.
Well,
I'm telling you right now, that's bullshit.
That does sound like it, and that's what you say to sound like smart.
I'll give you an
and tuned
example.
in.
I'll tell you how I know.
Oh.
Republicans
I
are
did
20 points more likely than Democrats to say it's about issues.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
sure.
Right. Well, Republicans are more likely to say they're independents too. That happens quite a lot. Okay, so that's the way to sound like you're fair and balanced. I'm voting on the issues, not on any character of the candidates. Even though, I don't know, for some reason that why is that not valid? Everyone used to say character counts, and in fact,
You want to guess the top two issues for voters?
Stonehenge and
the Mona Lisa.
Yeah.
The top two issues for voters are the future of American democracy and the economy.
Yeah. Stupid.
Future of American democracy first, 68%. Economy, 66%. Stability and normalcy, 58%. All of those favor Biden. That's why in the end I think people will come back to him.
It is the economy, stupid, and we need something to append to democracy. We can have Carville say it's the future of democracy, jackass, and the economy, stupid. You stupid jackass. This is the way to win votes. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with our big blockbuster Greg Dworkin segment. Well, segment 2 of a larger overarching
segment 200 times a million.
That's right. Oh, yeah. I've got the recorded files to prove it.
Yeah.
You want them?
No.
Okay.
But it reminds me.
I have them.
Back in the day, in the 2007s and 8s and 9s, I got some feelers about whether or not I'd be interested in taking the job at the CDC as their spokesperson.
Oh. Like, that would have been great for the pandemic, and Trump would have
Yeah, well, it was
yelled
at the
you.
time we were preparing for bird flu and swine flu and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And I laughed. And I said, I blog at Daily Kos, and I have been since 2003, and I have a bit of a history online, and you don't want to go there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, when you mention that you have a recorded archive of things I've said, tell me about it.
Okay. Well, would you like to run for president as an
3,000
independent?
hours of where Greg Dworkin was wrong about politics, life, and,
Okay.
the universe and everything.
You would have got it right on the disease stuff.
On some stuff. Anyway.
Okay.
The Atlantic is an interesting
Ocean
magazine.
magazine.
Yeah, it's an interesting ocean. As oceans go, one of the big seven.
Yeah, tops on my list, easily
it was,
on the top
it was
5.
It was considering moving to the Big Ten, but the contract just wasn't really, good enough. So let me give you some headlines and give you some examples.
All right.
This was from a couple of days ago. The Biden campaign's losing battle. No, it's not about the election. It's about beating up on the media. That never works, says the media.
Well,
in fact, it does work because, the New York Times has been forced to actually be a little bit more accurate in its reporting because of beating up on them.
Yeah.
But the two I want to focus on, just in passing, at least in mention, this is David Graham writing, Trump's campaign has lost whatever substance it once had. There's no 2024 equivalent of build a wall or lock her up. There's no rallying cry for Make America Great Again. It's the same old tired stuff, which you see at the rallies.
Yeah.
And it's all, nostalgia. And there's no substance, which is interesting because Tom Nichols, Radio Free Tom, Never Trumper, probably the prototype Never Trumper, writes, Trump world seems worried. Either that or they're betting their base doesn't care about the truth. And he goes and talks about the deceptive editing of the Biden videos we talked about the other day, how they take it out of context, they clip the frame. They deliberately go out of their way to make him look dotty and old, when in fact looking at the full picture shows it's the exact opposite. And Nichols talks about, well, why would you do that? Basically, when you have nothing, this is what you run. But at the same time, for his base, it works. The question is, does it work for everybody else? That's where the Biden campaign comes in. And that's, of course, why the debates are so important, if in fact they ever happen.
Okay.
Okay.
You'll have a chance to look and see for yourself, etc. Right. Okay.
Right.
Extended.
So the campaign, he says, engaged in similarly baffling move, not just the selectively edited videos. When Trump went to Detroit, the Trump courtier, Kellyanne Conway, went on Fox News to congratulate him for speaking to 8,000 people at a black church. He, in fact, did speak at a black church, but to a crowd of perhaps 100 or so mostly white people in a half-empty space that couldn't hold 8,000 people if seats were installed in the rafters and on the roof.
8,000. I wonder where they got the number. They made it up.
Okay. The pastor gaily said the next day he was surprised at the number of black people who actually attended, considering some had initially laughed at him when he approached them on the street about the event. So why not take the win, run the video of Trump with a black pastor, and leave it at that? Why go for the big lie and then look foolish? One possibility is the Trump campaign is worried. Last week, for example, Andrew Ross Sorkin reported on CNBC that top U.S. business leaders were concerned about Trump's mental fitness. Yeah. And several CEOs, according to Sorkin, said Trump was remarkably meandering, couldn't keep a straight thought, and was all over the map. So hours after that dropped, the New York Post ran an article that used almost identical language, except it was talking about Biden with G7 leaders, featuring comments attributed to an attendee from a non-U.S. delegation.
Okay.
Right. So the Biden video wrested attention away from yet another disturbing Trump rant about sharks. We covered that in the show, sharks and boats and electric batteries. And Conway was ridiculed for her Detroit comments, but the media response to Trump was all the campaign could ask for. Instead of publishing a headline like Trump speaks to a small, mostly white audience of loyalists in black church as his campaign lies about crowd size, that would be an accurate headline. The AP rolled out, Trump blasts immigrants for taking jobs as he courts voters at a black church.
Okay.
Or Trump hosts roundtable at Detroit church. So the media is just awful. And that whole thing about, well, it's a waste of time arguing about how awful the media is. No, it's not. Because when you point it out, they correct those headlines. And the headlines are often the only thing people read.
Sometimes they do. Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
For example, and he gives an example. The New York Times ran the headline, Biden campaign ad paints Trump as a felon, got a lot of pushback. And by midday, the story was retitled, Biden campaign ad calls attention to Trump's felon status. That's all you need to do. Just tell the truth. You don't have to gild the lily. And Tom Nichols goes on to say, in the end, the Trump campaign has chosen the path of deception, both because the weaknesses of his candidate demand it, and because it's a more reliable path to better media coverage. And why bother telling the truth if lying works? So we'll see in the end whether or not it works. it'll certainly work with his voters, but the question is going to be how many of those voters are there?
Okay. Yes. I don't know. We'll find out.
Okay.
Some of them are lying.
So these are trying times. These are unsettled times. There's articles, for example, about why sports figures are running for office.
Oh.
Remember Jesse Ventura? I mean, these things happen when things are unsettled.
Sports figures run when things are unsettled?
Well, experienced politicians quit, leaving an opening. Sports figures are compelled by outside forces like the promise of power, money, other things that, would normally say, well, that's stupid. I'm not qualified to be a senator. Well, these days, J.D. Vance is a senator.
That's true.
Martha Blackburn is a senator.
Right. Yeah, where else is it? Steve Garvey,
Steve
Herschel Walker.
Steve Garvey is exactly the one that comes to mind. Why the hell is he running? What does he know?
I don't know.
Nothing.
Yeah.
But, in unsettled times, it seems better to you than it would be if things were more settled. So there's a Scientific American article here about, we've hit peak denial. Here's why we can't turn away from reality. We're living through terrible time in humanity, and here's why we tend to stick our heads in the sand and why we need to pull them out.
Oh, sounds fun.
Yeah, well, it's just the theme is here, and they talk about COVID and things that sort, and how people cope is minimization. How we describe and measure things shapes how we feel about them, which is why it's important to notice when neutralizing language enters the chat. Turns a phrase like endemic and during COVID, lower hospitalization than last year. All this gives off an it's just a cold, mission accomplished vibe, which casts a disease into a worry-free zone that's safely behind us. And that keeps the quiet part quiet. The world's still in a pandemic. More than 73,000 Americans died of COVID in 2023, which is a higher number than car accidents or influenza. And among those infected, 9% and counting have long COVID. So that's just an example. But, obviously you apply it to politics. Minimization about Trump's fascism is how you cope when it worries you and it bothers you to your core and you're afraid. And so the best way to do it is say, well, the center will hold and the guardrails are there. And as soon as you see somebody say guardrails, you, the listener, the savvy listener should immediately think, minimalization.
Okay.
Right. Somebody is trying to minimize the threat by claiming there are guardrails, as if the guardrails haven't been removed and sold for scrap already.
Yeah, it's not the word, but usage like that. There are no guardrails. That sounds true. Don't worry, we've got guardrails. That is increasingly not true.
Right.
All right.
So, it's very difficult to tell the truth when you're a politician. Jimmy Carter didn't put a sweater on, and look what happened to him. And, at the same time, sometimes you need to do it. So that's why Biden tries to mix a little bit of reality with politics, which is, a good mix, whereas Trump is all about illusion and nothing about reality, nothing about substance, which is a bad mix.
Okay, yes, I would agree with that.
So, interesting.
Yeah. Well, we were promised an interesting magazine, and we got it.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Okay. Not an ocean. The ocean's fine. It's nothing wrong, but it's a little warmer than usual. That's all.
Right. So what's going to wind up happening? You take all of this together, and you wonder about the coverage that you're reading. And again, I disagree with the whole idea that, it's ineffective and Trump-like and Trumpish and Trumpy to attack the media. Well, that's from a thin-skinned media that doesn't like to be attacked at all.
All right.
So if you think that Trump is going to wind up winning.
Oh, no, not me. Yes.
If you do, and you're the media, how do you write your stories? Well, it doesn't influence me. I'm totally objective. I'll write things like how this election is slipping away from Biden because they're tied.
Okay. That doesn't really make sense. True? Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
But you'll also take a Fox News poll showing a remarkable, actually, shift. As Liam Donovan, the Republican operative, said, this is the best poll Biden's had in 9 months. How do you take that poll and describe it? Well, it's too early. It's only June.
Nah, dismiss.
Throw it in the average.
Okay.
And all the other minimization tricks that people use to try to avoid talking about something that's important, like 20% Nikki Haley voters, as Mike Madrid bring up. So when you listen to commenters, give you their collective wisdom, keep in mind they have a bias, sometimes unconscious, sometimes not so unconscious. And it's certainly slanting what they're going to say. That's why it's so interesting to see somebody like Simon Rosenberg, who isn't the most analytic guy in the world, but sometimes has his finger on the pulse of what's actually going on, and writes his Hopium Chronicles and says, the last 7 polls are looking better for Biden. Well, you're not being analytic about it. You didn't do a 538. You don't need to.
It's a vibes kind of time.
This is one of those situations where I'm just telling you that Mike Madrid is right, and Biden has a polling problem that's not going to show up on Election Day. And so I'm telling you why that is and what's going on under the surface. And it is interesting. And he gets attacked by the rest of the media who says, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's not analytic. He's got thin skin when you attack him, like we're all doing. He's not a politician.
I can prove
he's
it
not there
by
to be
attacking
attacked.
him.
But in any case, basically he's challenging the conventional wisdom that said there was going to be a red wave and that the Republicans are going to do really well in 2022 when they did not. Now everybody's revising history and said, well, we never really said that. The polls never really said that, And what people like Simon Rosenberg are doing is pointing out that we don't have Trafalgar around anymore. For some reason, they've disappeared. Oh. But there are still Republican firms like McLaughlin, who I will remind you is a Republican pollster who's pointing out that Trump has a lead in all the swing states. John McLaughlin, was Eric Cantor's pollster.
Oh, yeah, he did a great job.
And said Eric Cantor's going to cruise to re-election in his primary, and that was David Bratt. Is that the one that took him out?
Yeah, I think so.
And after that, there was a memo that circulated. This is a fact. This is not me making it up. That said Republicans do not hire McLaughlin as a pollster. There's a story in the Hill about it. I was just reading the other day. From back in the day.
Really?
McLaughlin's a terrible poster. But anyway, throw that in the average like the rest of them. Well, I understand what you're saying. Statisticians can't cherry pick and say, exclude that one. We've had this discussion for years. The old HuffPost pollster allowed you to eliminate Rasmussen from their average as part of the software they had built into their app. So when you looked at it online, you could pick the pollsters and say, I only want to look at landlines. I only want to look at likely voters. Here are the pollsters. I want to include them all except Rasmussen to see what the average looks like. Turned out the average didn't change all that much, but the ability to do that, to screen your own polls to get an idea of what you're seeing, is really great, because pollsters like McLaughlin do change the average. And
it's important to be able
aggregators
to
like
tell
Real
that.
Clear Politics are dishonest about which polls they pick and which ones they don't. They purport to take just the last 5, and make their average that way. But they exclude pollsters for no reason, and they have done this for years. Like I don't even look at them anymore, but they used to exclude Civics, the pollster that works with Daily Kos, which is an academic poll. It's not commercial, but high quality. And they had no reason to exclude it. They just did because they felt like it. So if that's what you're doing,
that's one of the
trust
things
the
you could
averages.
do with
G. Elliott Morris is much more transparent over at 538, so I trust what he's doing. He's basically saying it's a tie and the fundamentals favor Biden.
Okay.
But when we say favor, we're talking about 53-47. So, basically tied. And well within the margin of error. And that's how you should treat it. And that's why doofuses like Patrick Healy look at that and say, see, Biden's losing. Why? Because if your assumption is Trump's going to win, that's how you see everything. Those are the glasses. Those are the rose-colored glasses or red-colored glasses that you're putting on before you read anything.
Yeah.
And you're interpreting everything in that line.
Well, some people will have the bias in favor of a candidate, and others will have a bias in terms of, we got to keep the election exciting and close.
And they'll have the bias that all polls are equal, but the New York Times Siena poll is first among equals, and we rely on that exclusively in writing up what we think.
That's the vibe-producing poll, I guess. Yeah, all right. Well,
the only 3 words I have for that is Fox News poll. I mean, other polls say other things. It's basically a tie. What does a Fox News poll say? It's a tie. Why is it important? Because it's a 7-point swing for Biden over the last, 4 or 5 months. Why is that important? Because there's 4 or 5 months left, and more swing can happen because people really have not made up their mind.
All right.
Well, what about the double haters? Will they favor Biden by 11? Right. Well, what will they do in the end? Well, duh.
They double hate. Yeah, I'm not. I guess we can't be sure, but there's certainly no alternative that presents itself as non-crazy at the moment.
Yeah,
and,
it's still summer. It's not even Labor Day, and people are still resentful about the pandemic and about asking them to make up their mind this early when they really don't like either one. Well, what will you do in the end? I don't know. I already told you I don't know. Stop asking me. Yes, but I'm going to press you. You have to. Okay, fine.
Yeah. If the election were held today,
are you happy? Go away.
Oh, well, I hope that's
Stop calling me.
Yeah. Well, nothing you can do to create interest and enthusiasm where it's not there.
At election time? I don't know, and the polls don't either.
They may not, but if you had to, how about if you had to guess, if you had to place a bet, should we look at the betting markets? I mean, maybe that is the answer.
No, you can't.
People, but
you know why? The betting markets say Biden's going to win Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, but Trump's going to win the election. That's impossible.
That's terrible. All right. Well, yeah, they're pleading in the alternative there somehow. But I guess you can bet on anything. Right?
Yeah,
I bet that Trump will get no
I'm
votes
really not
but
that
win.
interested in what tech bros think. And that's who plays the betting markets.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's probably true. Yeah, I didn't really think about the demographic that actually bothers to actually place such a bet. You have to be a bit of a weirdo. So I guess that's kind of possible. And weirdly enough, they convert all their currency into bets, which is unusual too because, the amount of money you have tomorrow could be 0. Why are you doing this? Well, could be $1 billion. You have a problem. You need to seek help. You gamble with the very currency you have. Okay. All right. Well, I won't be doing that then. It's entertaining, but I guess maybe if there's ever a time to turn to the betting markets, it would not be in the middle of summer when nobody knows anything or cares because there's no payoff date in the near future.
Right. Now, here's one final piece, which I think is of interest because, again, it talks about style versus substance. This is from Bill Scher, centrist, June 20th, 2024. So it's from today in the Washington Monthly. Donald Trump's get out the vote plan is bonkers. The Trump campaign is tasking the far-right Turning Point Network with spearheading its ground game despite having no track record of success. And they basically fired Romney McDaniel to get here. Okay,
so it's a no-bid contract to Turning Point. Charlie Kirk.
Yes.
It's just grift. Okay, so he knows nothing about GOTV, but that doesn't matter. He's a famous guy that we feel like we owe money to, so here's some
Turning Point USA is a right-wing student group founded in 2012 by Charlie Kirk, an 18-year-old soon-to-be college dropout, and Bill Montgomery, an elderly Tea Party activist. Kirk adopted confrontational tactics to put his group on the map, such as a professor watch list. The right-wing upstart began in the Tea Party spirit of the 2010s with a libertarian economic focus, and now Kirk is waging a vicious culture war through podcasts and other social media with race-baiting tactics. Like, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. And Christian nationalist appeals like there's no separation of church and state. Conservative donors have rewarded Turning Point Network for its virulence with more cash every year, but the ability to vacuum up cash doesn't translate into the ability to boost voter turnout. I forget which election, maybe the Romney one, where Republicans invested this incredible amount of money in a app on the phone for voter turnout that crashed.
Yeah. I forget the
name.
You
vaguely remember that?
I do, and I think, Romney, right. I forget. They had some kind of a, funky name for the thing, and it was going to be,
it was going to be a game changer.
Yeah. Right, and I think it morphed into the Death Star in Brad Parscale's Trump campaign. But yeah, I do recall it. I had a name. I can't remember it anymore because it didn't work, so everybody forgot about it.
Now, Turning Point Network is headquartered in Arizona.
Great.
And in 2022, they had their first try at this. As the Arizona Republic reported, Turning Point PAC, the political action committee started by Turning Point USA, spent nearly $500,000 during the 2022 election cycle, including the primaries. The bulk of that, $377,201, went towards the general election races for Senate, governor, and Secretary of State in Arizona. And Turning Point's candidates lost all three of those races.
Okay.
So what did Turning Point do to help on the ground outside of money? They held a string of rallies.
Yeah. Well, that's Trump, of course, favors that. He thinks that's the leading indicator of...
Right, but none of that had an actual...
No, it
effect.
doesn't work. It pleases Trump, and it keeps Charlie Kirk in the fold by keeping him rolling in money, so...
Right.
Yeah,
so,
it doesn't have to
undeterred,
perform.
Turning Point last year began shopping around $108 million Get Out the Vote plan called Chase the Vote.
Chase the Vote, huh?
Focusing on Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. Then chair of the RNC, Ronna McDaniel, gave this plan the cold shoulder. Kirk launched attacks on McDaniel. McDaniel is out.
There you go.
And now Lara Trump is going to support it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really matter what their effectiveness is.
Well, Kirk's made out pretty well, so it's very effective.
He's happy with it. He gets the money, and I don't know. I mean, Charlie Kirk, I can't tell whether this is like a payoff to him or whether this is, oh, well, if you will agree to a kickback scheme, we'll give you the contract. I'm not
Now,
clear
remember,
whether
Bill Scher's a centrist.
Yeah.
In some progressive circles, base-only strategies have been trendy in recent years, but Democratic leaders have largely eschewed such insular thinking and kept courting swing voters, which, by the way, paid off in 2018, 2020, and 2022. If Trump's ground game grifters ignore the swing, they risk ceding a critical voting bloc to Biden. So that's the article, and I think it's worthy of mention.
Yeah. Well, they have to avoid this or eschew this swing because if you do anything that would appeal to a swing voter, you'll be disavowed by the candidate. You know, the base only is that's the messaging, even if you're hoping for something else. And Charlie Kirk will comply with that. So they're happy to give him the contract. There may or may not be a kickback involved. I don't know. But okay, what can I tell you? No one should be shocked that they're hiring people that have no track record. If you're looking for a track record, then it's not cronyism. And if it's not cronyism, it's not authentic Republicanism.
Right.
So
I'm reminded of one of my favorite bumper stickers from the 60s.
Oh.
We eschew Procrustean attitudes.
Wow. Okay. Well, in those days, the bumpers were larger.
Yes. Well, like, what does that even mean? Well, that's the point, buddy.
If you can read this.
If you can read this, get out of my
You're
my
making
lane.
it up. All right. Well.
Which, was only the second best bumper sticker of the era.
Oh. You want to tell me the first, or you?
Yeah, well, Phil Esposito was playing for the Boston Bruins and was a fantastic hockey player. Played with Bobby Orr, and Esposito's shtick was he was big and he would stand in front of the net, block the goalie, and always put in the rebound, and that's how he scored. He didn't have a great slap shot, from the point, but he was there around the net and got a whole bunch of goals and assists.
Okay.
And so the bumper sticker said, "Jesus saves, Esposito puts in the rebound." It was a Boston sticker, but it was great.
Well, I guess so. Yeah. All right. I like that one. Good for the times.
Yep. Anyway, that's it.
Yep. Okay. Well, that has to be it, or nearly has to be it, because we're about out of time. But okay, you've filled the hour once again.
I filled my 20 minutes. That's my job.
It expands beyond. Okay.
Back
would
in
you
the
like
day,
to,
which was like, a century ago?
Yeah.
David and I agreed I'd come in and give like a 20-minute shtick for the 9
Yeah, I didn't want to
9:30, 9:10 to 9:30 slot.
Right.
And somehow or other, it metastasized.
Yeah, it'd be, hey, you know what's really great? I don't do any work between 9 and 10. What an
part
awesome
of the deal,
thing.
and part of the way this happened is that David had kids, and some of whom needed to get to school, some of whom, in fact, missed the bus.
Right.
Some of whom, in fact, had to somehow get to school. And in the magic of, I don't understand how, David was able to get them there in like 5 minutes.
Yes.
And he would say, excuse me for 5 minutes while I get my kid to school. And then he'd be back in 5 minutes. I never understood that.
Yeah.
I live in a small town. I get that people walk to school, but how do you get it that fast? I don't. In any case,
I built a Hyperloop.
That's how the
before
the 20 minutes expanded to 50.
Yeah, sometimes you need to keep talking because I don't know how long I'm going to be out there. I'm going to try to keep it short, but yeah. And then, of course, once we entered the Trump era, there was no summarizing the news in 20 minutes.
There was too much
anyway.
to talk about.
Yeah.
Right. So the question is going to be, if Biden wins and your kids are out of high school.
Yeah. Will you continue?
Yeah. Well, I will continue, but do we need to do a whole hour?
No, the show will be 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Because everything's fine. Right? And, things are on an even keel. Maybe we'll just do an
international edition.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That's true. We'll always have problems there. And it will be their economies, stupid.
Right. 2093, Netanyahu clings to power while...
Yeah, well, unfortunately, probably true. I don't know. We'll see how long he lasts.
Okay.
Okay.
There's 3 voters fight on whether or not to...
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that's it for our... The time is what it is. We could stretch the subject out as long as we want, but in about 20 seconds, we'll be playing the music that signifies... The
20 minutes are
the
up.
Exit, yes. So, all right. After the weekend, we'll catch back up with you on Monday. I think everything will be.
I won't be doing the show on Monday. I've got a family event to attend to.
Okay. Well, then, me too. I'll find something else to do. Actually, we have some wisdom teeth extractions coming up on Monday. Not mine.
Let's do that live on the air.
Right. If it was mine, it would be very difficult to understand. Yeah. Luckily, these days, it's mostly about snoozing your way through it. So that's good. All right. Well, we will catch up with you on Wednesday. A whole week nearly will have passed by then. There'll surely be some news and probably about 57, 58 minutes worth of it, if I'm not mistaken. Thanks, Greg. We'll see you then. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and a little extra conversation and the exit there. Always good to have them hang around, even when the 20 minutes is up. We do a 21st minute behind the scenes, but sounds like we'll have to wait until Wednesday to check in with Greg again, and who knows how many more times the former president, now convicted felon, will be indicted between now and then. I don't think there's any expected, but expect the unexpected. That's what we're always told. Okay, let's see. By the way, did we take care of yes, we did, resending all of the notices. Or I've been noticing, I keep forgetting to double check to make sure whether the mighty OCD is putting out his notice to all on social media and making use of it and retweeting it early so that people can pick up on the signal. All right, but time to dive into Pocket and see what we've got. There's plenty of it. Something of niche interest that struck me on the way to the office today. And that was, let me see, there was a lot of discussion yesterday that I think stemmed from, boy, I wonder if I can dig up the original issue. And how would I do it? Because I don't think I stayed out of the commentary on it, but I think there was, where did it come from? A comment made maybe by Larry Sabato, if I'm not mistaken, if not just his outlet. But all right, well, I think here's part of the discussion that's happening now. All right. Well, at any rate, I think it was his comment, and it was a sort of, it looked to me like maybe it was sort of an offhand comment in the Sabato commentary and forecasting of state election battles. That is to say, battles for the control of the state legislature. And in his focus on Arizona, which I guess where partisan control hangs in the balance, he was making a note of the importance of control of the state legislatures with respect to, as he put it, sort of the certification of the Electoral College and the outcome of the presidential election. And I think what he was trying to get at was, if you put some of these state legislatures in the partisan control of MAGA extremist Republicans, they will essentially befoul the Electoral College process, either by, there's only one, I guess, methodology that they're contemplating, which would be if Biden were to win their state, despite there being a MAGA extremist majority in the state legislature. And remember, of course, though that would seem to be unlikely, it's increasingly likely in an increasing number of states because of the extreme gerrymandering that goes on, and people are building protected Republican districts for themselves. And the upshot of it is that a Republican will win these seats no matter what, even if they're a MAGA extremist lunatic. And so they're sending these cadres of MAGA lunatics to the state capitals, despite the fact that the state in its entirety, when it's asked for, at least for its presidential preference, leans Democratic, or ends up leaning Democratic anyway on election day. And despite this, they are represented by very often not only MAGA majorities, but sometimes Republican/MAGA supermajorities that can do considerably more than bare majorities. But at any rate, even with a bare majority, you can do things like say, oh, Biden won the election in this state. Why don't we, through whatever mechanics, simply send or purport to send Electoral College votes from our state that do not reflect that result? Fake electors, like we had the last time. It sounds crazy, but we actually did see that happen in 2020. Some of you may have forgotten. Nobody listening to this show. Anyway, Sabato's point was, remember that if Republicans are able to seize control or hold control in some of these legislatures, they may try to do just that. And I think he sort of couched it in terms of, remember, this is important because of the role that the legislatures play in determining the outcome of the Electoral College. And there's been a lot of pushback about that. And people saying, well, listen, the legislatures are not supposed to have a role in this. Not the federal, even the federal legislature. Congress is not supposed to interpret or try to overturn the results. They're just supposed to count the certificates. And that's sort of true in the way things normally operate. I guess what struck me about it was this morning, part of the discussion was a comment on Blue Sky from Randy R. Potts, who is described in his bio as editor, journalist, anti-fascist, etc., writing for The Baffler and others, and pointing out, as he put it, today's casual reminder, with a link to the National Archives and its description of its role in this process, casual reminder to journalists that the U.S. Congress, rather than the state legislatures, but the U.S. Congress does not actually certify whether or not the Electoral College certificates are valid. That is done, as it should be, by archivists at the National Archives. Congress's role is merely to count the already certified certificates. That's it. Well, do we quibble with this? Probably not yet in writing, but maybe after the show. But here on the radio show, we have a little bit more latitude to do that. So, ideally, it's done elsewhere at the National Archives, and then, therefore, only ratified essentially. The conclusions of the National Archives and the experts are accepted ordinarily at face value in the Congress. But is it really the case to say that the Congress has no role in actually certifying whether or not the electoral college certificates are valid? Well, I think they reserve that right to themselves. Now, that could be improper, but that's certainly been the practice. They rarely need to exercise any discretion in it, and they usually simply say, just procedurally, the certificates will arrive at the National Archives, which will examine them and then hands them over to Congress with the notation that is often repeated in the words of the presiding officer. That's the then Vice President of the United States, acting in his or her capacity as President of the Senate, presiding over the joint session of Congress, and will recite, according to the script handed to them by the parliamentarian. And the parliamentarian script is not coordinated directly with, but is meant to reflect the conclusion of the National Archives. And so the Vice President will say, in receiving each of the Electoral College certificates and ballots as they're being opened, will say, the chair presents for consideration or whatever, or the electoral votes from the state of, and beginning doing the whole alphabetical order thing, Alabama, Arizona, all your A states, and will say about each certificate as it comes that the certificates, the votes appear to be regular in form and authentic. And therefore, you present them for consideration and to the tellers, and then they count them. Now, there's an opportunity there for members of either the House or the Senate to make objections. Sometimes they have to wait until some later point to actually formally register their objection. But each state's name is read out. The presiding officer announces that, as a matter of fact, each of the certificates appears to be regular in form and authentic. Does that mean that the vice president has, in fact, examined them him or herself, and come to that conclusion? No, probably not. They're just reading the script. But the script is there, and it's there for a reason. And you don't want it to be the case and for things to happen. But do you really want it? Do you want the conclusion to be that Congress has no role in it whatsoever? I mean, we saw a bad thing nearly happen in 2020, which might convince you, we want to make sure that Congress has no role in interpreting the validity of the certificates, because if they did in 2020, they might very well have decided poorly and decided, let's accept the fake ones instead, because some of them were just in on the scheme. So you might say, well, the solution to that is to simply declare that Congress has no flexibility here. They don't get to judge the regularity and validity of the certificates. They simply count the votes. Well, that's fine so long as somebody is verifying the authenticity and validity, and that person or people are doing a good job at it and doing it in good faith. If you were to turn off somehow, and in a good faith effort to simply, report the news rather than try and interpret things and change the outcome, and you say, all right, we're going to turn off, disconnect, remove congressional ability to actually determine the authenticity and validity and accuracy of these certificates, you then leave yourself exposed to, what if the coup plotters are people at the National Archives instead of people in Congress? Now, it's highly unlikely under normal circumstances, but let's just say, for instance, Trump were to find himself in power and not, whether through legitimate means or not. And fast forward to 2028, when presumably the National Archives is at that point presided over by Trump partisans. He has implemented Project 2025, Schedule F, etc., fired everybody at the National Archives who isn't a loyalist. He doesn't need them anymore at this point. Install loyalists. Maybe he has no plans to try and stay in power. He's going to retire and conduct another election. Of course, it's his expectation that he can rig it in favor of electing Ivanka or whatever it is he has in mind for successor. Maybe it just goes straight back to regular type politics, and some Republican not in his control is supposed to run for office. Doesn't really matter, but he's replaced everybody at the National Archives there with loyalists, but somehow doesn't rig elections in a way that gives him personal control and a personal veto over things in Congress, let's say. And so you find yourself with the bad guys resident at the National Archives and the good guys resident in Congress. And the National Archives simply sends you a bunch of fake Electoral College certificates and says, psh, what's anybody in Congress going to be able to do about this? They've legislatively self-immolated. They've turned off their power to actually review the validity of the certificates. They have to take our word for it, and we're evil. You would not want that. So, presumably, you still want to be able to have some ability to object to the validity of the certificates, if necessary, in Congress. And the new Electoral Count Act, the Electoral Count Reform Act, still enables Congress to do it. It raises the bar. It isn't one member each of the House and the Senate who have to object in writing in order to bring the issue to a head, but rather now a larger chunk of both. And you could still presumably, it's not such an impossible bar. If there's some obvious facial fraud going on here, you probably have no difficulty getting the signatures that you need in order to do it. But what it does mean is, yeah, they're serious, although it's usually just a rubber stamp of what happens at the National Archives, because the National Archives is a professionalized, nonpartisan organization. It's comfortable and acceptable for Congress to simply rubber stamp their conclusions and simply say that because the National Archives says so, I feel comfortable reading you the script handed to me by the parliamentarian, which says that the certificates from the state of Alabama appear to be regular in form and authentic, and so therefore let's read the numbers, count them, and have the tellers start doing the math. We bypass the whole thing of, are you sure? Does that have the seal on it? Does it have the governor's signature on it? Does it comport with news reports of what happened in that state? Is there, are all the signatures there? Are all the signifiers of authenticity there, or are they not? Well, we could examine all of that, or we could just bypass it and say, NARA says it's fine. But what do you do if NARA is populated by idiots? You will want there to be a role for the U.S. Congress at that point. So, yeah, we'd rather that they just rubber stamp the work of nonpartisan experts, but what if there are no nonpartisan experts? Of course, what if you take over both? Well, then you're well and truly effed, and that's, something you're going to have to deal with through other means. But in our effort to write out the ability of MAGA extremists to simply forge their own Electoral College certificates, don't go overboard and write the Congress out of the act of verifying and agreeing to accept the validity, subject to their own independent review, of Electoral College certificates. Just want to put that warning out there. Nobody's going to listen to it because we're not going to arrive at that situation, or that's not the place we're at right now. And the NARA representatives are going to be fully nonpartisan professionals for the 2024 election. And it's hard to imagine the process by which they get wholly flushed out and replaced by MAGA partisans in the next 4 years should Trump seize power one way or another. But remember to war game your situations that way as well. That's another stupid thing that can happen. And we haven't given it any consideration because it's unlikely, for instance, that you're going to end up with partisans at the archives and not in Congress as well. But it could happen, so be prepared for it. All right, that's all. I know that was a little longer even than I needed to spend on it, but there was a lot of digital ink spilled on it yesterday. It was very interesting, and also the discussion went in a very different direction for the bulk of it, which was, hey, by the way, can we stop doing the well actually thing about the treasonous nature of sending in forged electoral college certificates and then also trying to sack the Capitol and change the outcome by violence? Those things are treason. They would have been there was a big argument on yesterday that these are activities that would have been recognized as treasonous by the founders. And the idea of well actually-ing it out of there by saying, well, the definition of treason, I think nobody would have had any difficulty among the founders in understanding what it meant when the Capitol was surrounded by an angry mob. Well, none of them had guns. Well, some of them did. Well, none of them had machine guns because there are no such things, apparently, according to the Supreme Court. Anyway, I know, but neither did any of the people in, Shays' Rebellion. They had no difficulty understanding what those things were. And it's a good and interesting point, especially in the face of originalism as a supposedly valid mode of understanding of events of today. Anyway, so I just wanted to kind of bring that up and make a note of that and spend some extended, do the commentary that would be very difficult to type out on social media. All right, let's see. Another thing that I grabbed here from the morning social media rounds, I don't know whether I have access to the original reports or not, but I got this Blue Sky message here from Blue Virginia, which has an eye on such things. We mentioned in talking with Joan on Tuesday the primary, and we mentioned it again yesterday with Greg, the results not yet in, still counting votes in Virginia's 5th district, where incumbent Republican wackadoodle Bob Good was being challenged by primary challenger Republican wackadoodle John McGuire, about whom we knew next to nothing except for the fact that he was essentially a MAGA Republican and also had the bonus recommendation for him of being a Navy SEAL, not yet indicted or suspected of tying anybody up for sexual gratification in his basement. Not that all Navy SEALs will do this, but an inordinate number of Navy SEALs, it turns out, are not particularly trustworthy just because they were Navy SEALs. That doesn't erase bad character. It might even, in some cases, cultivate it. We can't be sure. But I don't know. That's meant to be something, a flag that you wave at people and say, he's a good guy. He was a Navy SEAL. Well, we've had some really rotten Navy SEAls pop up lately. Anyway, as it turns out, John McGuire is one of them. What do you know? I don't think there's anybody tied up in his basement. I don't know whether that's just the current condition of the basement and he has had people tied up there all along but has chosen to release them in wake of having possibly won the nomination. Or maybe it's enough for you to know that John McGuire was on the Capitol grounds on January 6, 2021. Probably not surprising to you, but Blue Virginia was sharing that via social media today, saying, though McGuire's definitely the favorite to pull it out, by which I mean election victory. You never know with a Navy SEAL. In Virginia 5, here's a quick reminder of who McGuire is, since the mainstream media, quote unquote, rarely mentions it. Yeah, it looks like he'll probably pull out the victory there. It's a very close election. It's a matter of a couple hundred votes. There are a couple hundred provisional ballots outstanding, but I think not enough to change the outcome. Most of the commentators who are watching it closely are saying the only chance for a Bob Good reversal here is if there's been some tabulation errors along the way and they just plain added the numbers up wrong, but doesn't appear to be the case. But with him looking like he will come away as the nominee, they thought it was important to include a screenshot of the Sedition Hunters. Is it? I don't know. Is it from Twitter? Probably their message via social media. John McGuire, who they tag here using his Twitter handle, I guess, posted a selfie on January 6th, but failed to mention just how close he was to the violence happening. He's, of course, at the time, he was running for re-election to the Virginia House of Delegates, District 56. Now, of course, becoming the nominee for Virginia's 5th congressional district. And, there's the picture in which he appears. There's the selfie. It's hard to tell from the selfie version exactly where he is or how close to the Capitol. But if you're familiar with the grounds in the background, you'll be able to figure it out. And, of course, surrounded by a bunch of weirdos with Trump flags and, the less violent-looking part of the crowd in the selfie. But as it turns out, he's also captured on camera in somebody else's shot, very close, in fact, to the front lines in the foreground of the photo showing him. In the background, there are the riot police, easily identifiable and taking up the vast majority of the foreground of that photo. So there you go. The Navy SEAL who looks to have won the Republican nomination in Virginia's 5th district is a January 6th-er, probably to no one's surprise. And I guess he's been kind of open about it too, but not open about how close he was to the front lines of it. I was there, but I didn't, maybe that he didn't enter the Capitol, but he probably wasn't too forthcoming with how close he was to the confrontation line with the cops. All right, let's see. Other things to share with you. I've got a couple of older pieces that have been waiting in the wings for some time, and let's see if we can't choose one or two that we can shoehorn in. I guess I should be doing like a countdown to July 1st. And today being June 20th, we've got 30 days in June, so 10 days. The 11th day would be July 1st. That, just a reminder, is the day by which Steve Bannon is supposed to surrender for his prison term. I think we noted in passing that was the case, but we never really read the report of it and noted it officially on the show. And I guess maybe we can shoehorn that in before our break and then take 2 minutes to select a long read topic for our last segment, but just to formally put it on the record and to remind you that there's some good news coming. We hope, barring some kind of weird thing or absconding to Russia, which, I'd be willing to entertain that as a news headline for the July 1st show. Judge orders Bannon to surrender for prison term by July 1st. This, of course, was reported back on June 6th. So it's been 2 weeks since this was in the news, but we only sort of noted it in passing, I guess. And of course, it's a 4-month prison sentence that he was always facing. And remember that he was convicted for this 2 years ago. So for 2 years, he's been delaying going inside for his 4-month stretch, which may or may not be worth it to him in the end. And of course, beginning on July 1st means going to August, September, October, November 1st, virtually election day before he finishes his sentence, assuming he serves the entirety of the sentence, and doesn't get any more time added on for bad behavior. I don't know if you're eligible for that if you're only in for a 4-month stretch. Alan Fuhr and Aishwarya Kavi. Have I got that right? Aishwarya, I don't know how you would. Where does the emphasis go? Aishwarya Kavi? I don't know. I'll ask Alan Fuhr to report on that. Again, New York Times, federal judge 2 weeks ago told Stephen KG Bannon, a longtime advisor, of course, to former President Donald Trump, to surrender by July 1st to start serving that 4-month prison term for disobeying a congressional subpoena just out of curiosity, I want to take a look at the calendar function here. July 1st is a Monday, so it's not just that it's the beginning of the month, it's a fortuitous time to start on things like that. And so we got, another, like I said, week and a half until that happens. Bannon was sentenced all the way back in October of 2022 on contempt of Congress charges after refusing to give testimony to the January 6th committee. It's Judge Carl J. Nichols who has overseen that case, just to add his name to the roster of judges doing the tough work here. And Carl Nichols has allowed him to remain free even through his appeal. Last month, however, Bannon lost the first round of that challenge as a 3-judge panel of the Federal Appeals Court in Washington decided that his guilty verdict on charges of ignoring the House committee's demand for his testimony was proper. And because of the panel's ruling, Nichols said he could no longer justify keeping him outside while postponing the prison sentence. So there you go. About 10 days until we hear whether that worked. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So, 4-month prison sentence set to begin in about 10 days from now. If all goes well, there's still, Bannon is still trying to see if he can get the D.C. Court of Appeals to sit in review of the panel's decision, reviewing it en banc, but it doesn't sound like they're at all interested, and certainly will run out of legal excuses for staying out of prison very shortly, and we'll see. Peter Navarro, meanwhile, is already in prison, having been ordered to report in mid to late March for his 4-month sentence, which means he'll be about ready to be released at the time that Bannon goes in. So that's nice. It's nice that they only overlap for a short period of time. I don't think they're going to be in the same facility, but I'm more interested in stretching out the amount of time during which we can say that Trump's top advisors are actually in prison, or have been in prison lately. So that's good news. By the way, what's up with Peter Navarro? I'm just sort of checking. Is there any news about him? Like, is he, writing a book in prison? Maybe something about his struggle or something similarly titled? Maybe, I don't know. But as it turns out, there's a little bit of news. One thing, by the way, Donald Trump Jr. apparently has visited Navarro while in prison. Not according to ABC News. I mean, it's not Donald Trump himself, it's Trump Jr., but, it's somewhat interesting. I don't really know whether there's anything to make of it, but I'll just note it in passing. Then a couple of other articles about what's been going on with him. There's one from The Economist, which is behind a paywall, but notes, I was a little bit intrigued by the headline, that Donald Trump's trade hawk, Navarro, is plotting behind bars. So maybe, writing his version in American Mein Kampf, or what's the plot? Is it that, or is it like how to get out of, kitchen duty, or is it whether they're going to shiv another prisoner? What's the plot? Peter Navarro's dark vision of the global economy could shape Trump too. Maybe it's just, I've got time on my hands, so I will send you some suggestions for inclusion in Project 2025. Here's what The Economist will share with us. It's just a teaser of the first two paragraphs. Ahead of America's election in November, company bosses, financiers, and diplomats are busy calling on Donald Trump's allies, trying to divine the economic policies the former president will pursue if he's reelected. But there is one man in Trump's orbit who holds more sway than most, and who is in prison, by the way, and who for now is virtually inaccessible, and that's because he is inmate number 04370-510 in the Federal Correctional Institution of Miami. Peter Navarro, leading economic advisor in Trump's first administration, is more than halfway through a 4-month sentence for contempt of Congress. He bristles with indignation at the justice system. Rawr. Disdains Joe Biden's record and longs to steer America toward hardline protectionism. In written correspondence with The Economist, Mr. Navarro has laid out how he thinks Mr. Trump should approach trade, from turning up the heat on China to slapping tariffs on just about everyone else. It is a dark, angry vision for the global economy. As polls stand, it is one Mr. Navarro may shortly be able to promote from inside the White House, as opposed to from inside the big house. Well, that's in keeping with what Trump's been saying at his rallies, right? The idea of using tariffs instead of income tax, interestingly enough, to raise revenues. All right, so that's what he's plotting behind bars. That's not going to be an attractive message to The Economist. They should probably just come right out and say so. The other I noticed looked kind of interesting and unexpected. This from the NBC News affiliate in South Florida, NBCMiami.com, Channel 6 down there. Woman says letter sent to Trump ex-aide Navarro. Weird enough to begin with, you're writing to him. This letter apparently resulted in a suspicious request for money. And I'm not certain what made it suspicious. We'll find out as we read about this. Like if it's Peter Navarro, do you think, oh, that's suspicious? Isn't he a wealthy individual? Yes, but he's a grifter and a cheater and whatever. So maybe it's not that unusual, except I think maybe the request didn't come from Peter Navarro, which leads us to another weird story. What's happening in prison these days? A letter of support sent to imprisoned former Trump aide Peter Navarro resulted in a text message with a PayPal link tied to a fellow inmate, a convicted fraudster. So I guess some people are not rehabilitating themselves while they're in prison. And interestingly, so I guess someone maybe gets a hold of this letter from this woman to Navarro and says, I wonder if I can pull off an identity theft from inside prison targeting this person. I don't know whether to root for this guy or not. Federal prison authorities have relocated a convicted fraudster, besides the one we were talking about before, who the NBC6 investigators linked to a PayPal account in a message that appeared to solicit financial support for a fellow inmate, Peter Navarro, a former top-ranking advisor to former President Donald Trump. An attorney for Benjamin Forrest McConley told NBC6 his client had, quote, been hanging out with Navarro. This is who he spends time with. I mean, you're not going to find a quality crowd to hang out with in prison, generally speaking. But, birds of a feather certainly are going to flock together. I mean, you could be hanging out with, I don't know, murderers. You got the choice of murderers. There's probably some drug felons in there, maybe. Perhaps, I don't know, are there any, what are clean-cut American kids? Which federal statutes are they violating these days? I don't know. You're going to be running into a lot of fraudsters in there. Anyway, last weekend, I forgot. There's more to it here. Benjamin Forrest McConley, his attorney told the NBC reporters he's been hanging out with Navarro while housed in the same unit of the Federal Correctional Institution, Miami minimum security camp near Homestead. They're in camp together. It's summer. It's appropriate. But last weekend, McConley was placed in a special housing unit at the adjacent, more secure facility, his attorney confirmed. Well, if you're in minimum security and you're committing more fraud, you're in there for fraud. I guess it doesn't really matter if you're in there for fraud or something else. But if you're committing fraud from inside the minimum security facility, they might say, what about a little more security for this guy? And I guess they did. The move was 2 weeks after a Pennsylvania woman alerted the prison that after sending a letter of support to Navarro, she was solicited to contribute to PayPal or Cash App accounts. Now, I'm soliciting you to do the same for this show, but I'm not in prison. So, I mean, maybe I should be. Maybe I will be in a couple of years, or maybe only in a couple of months, depending on what happens with control of the White House, whether legally awarded or not. But once I am inside, it's probably going to be pretty difficult to send me cash. So by all means, let's do it now. Anyway, a prison source tells NBC6 that McConnelly is facing an investigation. Ooh, not one of those. There's no indication that Navarro played any role in the solicitation, by the way. And unlike McConnelly, his status as a minimum security inmate at the camp has not changed. NBC6 shared the information with Navarro's attorney, who declined to comment. And you better not, because I guess there's also still every chance that he is, in fact, involved in this fraud. But you don't want to get caught. So you say, I have nothing to do with it. But I don't know. At the minimum, he apparently didn't secure his correspondence very well. But it may just be McConnelly's own initiative. I'm going to do some fraud, and this guy seems like a sucker. And there's lots of suckers writing to this sucker. Why don't I steal their identities? Navarro, a Harvard-educated economist who's nonetheless in prison, who, as a top administration official in the Trump administration, rubbed elbows with a president and captains of industry, met McConnelly after surrendering in March to the minimum security camp that is part of FCI Miami. Sounds like a dramatic series we could be making. FCI, except it's the other side of Law and Order. Anyway, Navarro is serving a 4-month sentence for contempt of Congress, of course, as you know, all about that. The events of this incident unfolded last month after the woman whom they're calling Sue, because she does not want her last name disclosed. And by the way, good choice. If you tell people that my real name is Loretta, I mean, it isn't, I don't know, but then I will sue you. Okay, how about if we just call you Sue? All right, fine. The events unfolded last month after Sue sent Navarro that supportive letter from Pennsylvania on May 13th. And I'm wondering if she's learned any lesson at all from this. I mean, Navarro may not be involved in it, but just the corollary of everything Trump touches dies, right? Navarro ends up, metaphorically, touching Trump. He's in prison. You write to Navarro, you get your identity stolen, and or people start trying to solicit money from you in Navarro's name via PayPal. Just stay away. The people who are in prison, just leave them there. Unless you already know them and you want to support them, that's one thing. The jailhouse romance stuff, I don't know. Anyway, it might not have been romantic in nature, but still, don't bother. Find something else to do with your time, citizen. She says, though, I decided to craft a letter of support for Mr. Navarro, she told NBC6, to lift his spirits and to let him know that 4 months was not a forever type thing, and to try to glean something positive out of an otherwise negative experience. Maybe she's just ministering to him. 3 days later, I received a text message from someone who had obviously read that letter, she recalled. Greetings from Dr. Navarro. Thank you for your continued support. We need all the support we can get. We must get the message out to the thousands of voters for MAGA, it read, before making a pitch for money. Should you want to contribute to Stamps Commissary, you can send any amount by PayPal or Cash App, it continued. All contributed funds go toward Stamps for Correspondence. God bless you. God bless MAGA. God bless America. Suspicious. All right, so she's smarter than she sounded initially. At least she was suspicious. Sue checked the phone number used to text her and says it revealed an association with McConnelly, who she quickly discovered is serving a 13-year sentence for scamming investors who thought they were buying into movies and Broadway shows of $60 million, according to court records and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Miami. It's a little bit awkwardly stated, but he scammed people out of $60 million total by pretending they were investing in movies and Broadway shows. So I thought, whoa, so this is not cool, she said. She's right. When she checked a Bureau of Prisons website, BOP, Bureau of Prisons website, and found McConley was, like Navarro, housed at FCI Miami. She contacted prison officials, and after getting no response for 2 weeks, NBC6. The NBC6 investigators then looked into the PayPal account mentioned in the text and found it used the name Forrest McConley. Forrest being McConley's middle name and also the first name of his father, who we've been unable to reach by phone, email, or through McConley's attorney. 2 weeks after Sue alerted prison authorities of what she found, McConley last weekend was moved to the SHU, the Special Housing Unit. You're special. This is attorney confirmed. Locked up 23 hours a day with limited privileges while BOP investigates. While in the SHU, McConley's attorney said he's unable to communicate with him or others, so McConley could not be reached for comment. For her part, Sue said, I thought, man, something's got to stop this because that's not very good. I don't want people taken advantage of. People don't have a lot of money to spend, and while I applaud their trying to give support to Mr. Navarro, you're not that smart, he doesn't need our money. Navarro has his own fundraising site for his legal defense fund. If he wants to chisel and grift from you, you'll know where to go, which shows more than $1.3 million raised. It's unclear whether Navarro ever saw Sue's letter, and both current and former BOP employees tell NBC6 security lapses can lead to inmates getting access to others' mail. Well, that's a federal crime. You probably want to try to avoid that happening inside a federal institution. Anyway, can't control everything. I mean, murder's a federal crime, too, if it's committed on federal property. And they do have an interest in preventing inmates from murdering one another. And yet it does happen from time to time. In the event Navarro sees this report, there's a little bit more here, I'm sorry. Video taken from FCI Miami visitor parking lot this spring, obtained by NB6 investigators, shows a camp inmate carrying a bag like those that contain mail, according to those sources. So they handle the mail inside, and I guess you can, if you're interested in more fraud, like, hey, this 13-year sentence for fraud isn't enough for me, I want to do some more, you have that opportunity. In the event Navarro sees this report, Sue said she has a message for him. Hang in there. 4 months will be over in a hurry, and there's lots of people out there that are supporting you and wish you well. Well, there's one, anyway. The Bureau of Prisons will not comment on what it's doing to prevent inmates from soliciting funds into PayPal or other outside accounts by intercepting mail meant for other inmates. If that's what happened here, it's a clear violation of prison rules and possibly federal laws against wire or mail fraud, an attorney familiar with the matter told us. So there you go. You could have probably asked an attorney not familiar with the incident and gotten the same answer. Anyway, I don't know. That was entertaining and unexpected. And it's actually dated June 6th. So not that long ago. And hey, the end of his prison term, I guess, is coming up. He's got about a month left. He's 3/4 of the way through and already having his mail stolen and used by fellow fraudsters. It's a small fraternity of fraudsters inside the federal facility there. Okay, so let's see. Other items to share with you include, let's see, we got a couple of longer reads that I thought we have our choice of which ones to share with you. I thought perhaps this one might be of interest and is always timely. This, a Don Moynihan Substack entry in his, I'm not certain, it's difficult to tell from the URL. What's the name of the Substack? I'm not even sure. Is it Can We Still Govern? Yes, that appears to be it. It's not just a question he's asking. That's the title of the Substack style entry here. The title of the piece, A Weaponization of Government Trope Explainer. Got it? We see them using that trope all the time. I'd be interested to see what he'd like to reveal by way of explainer on this one. Another linguistic ruse by the people who actually want to weaponize government. In other words, another manifestation of the old adage, which we use here all the time, every Republican accusation is a confession. So what does Don have to say about this? The Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government, remember we actually have one of those, began its business this week. This is a throwback article from February of 2023, actually. I guess it just was recirculated in light of recent events, but always worth putting on the record, even if it's deep background. The hearings were not especially interesting, and they never turned out to be particularly interesting either. Replaying old grievances of how Trump had been mistreated with a star FBI whistleblower who turned out to have left government in the last century. And then, of course, since then, although I don't know, they testified to the weaponization subcommittee, another star FBI whistleblower who turned out to be a fraudster himself and ended up getting indicted. What's more interesting is the way in which the idea of weaponization itself has emerged and been, well, weaponized. And it's interesting. Yeah, as I mentioned, this is an older article, but we'll have the benefit of having seen most of this analysis holding true, as Republicans do, in fact, attempt to weaponize government and lay the groundwork for weaponizing it should they be able to seize control of government and the White House again after this fall. The creation of the subcommittee represents the formalization of a new trope that has quickly become part of the partisan language of government, serving as a linguistic shorthand for an array of imagined misdeeds in the way that woke or CRT has come to do. That's an interesting observation to include it in that pantheon there. If one only gets traction for a certain amount of time, you just move on to the next one. CRT ran its course, got expanded into woke. That too, that one has more legs, it seems. It stuck around even longer. But weaponization of government, I guess, is still waiting in the wings. They've been working on it for a while, and it still works. But I don't know. Maybe it hasn't reached its full potential. The word weaponization is intended to evoke a Pavlovian response that short-circuits actual engagement about evidence. You know the narrative already, so no need to critically assess the specifics. As it is used, weaponization appears to mean an inappropriate use of government resources to target people for unjustified partisan purposes. But weaponization by who and against who? As the example he approved or provided, which was a embedded tweet of an embedded C-SPAN video of Elise Stefanik, in which she explains how Mike Pence did nothing wrong and how Trump was treated unfairly, but also how Biden's actions are a national security threat. I guess this being Mike Pence also had some government documents in his home. So did Biden. So therefore, something is exactly the same. Mike Pence did nothing wrong. Interestingly, somehow is the conclusion. But Biden did something terrible, even though, as it turns out, of course, the investigators assigned to the case decided, nope, not terrible enough to file any charges. Anyway, Stefanik says Pence did nothing wrong, but Biden did somehow. She also says the FBI has been weaponized against Trump and is engaged in a cover-up for Biden. So from that example, it makes clear that there's no effort to employ the idea of weaponization even-handedly. The implication is that the federal government is coming for conservatives. Stefanik is a member of the committee, of course, the Weaponization Committee, along with such notables as Matt Gertz, not Matt Gertz. We did that one. He's going to love that one. Matt Gertz, of course, constantly confused with Matt Gaetz, who is the one who's actually on the committee. He would really enjoy that. And Gaetz, of course, investigated for sex trafficking by one of the agencies of the committee will investigate. So where does the trope come from? And by the way, he's facing a renewed effort by the ethics committee that Joan mentioned on Tuesday. We should probably get to some of the reporting on that. I saw, you know what, as a matter of fact, well, maybe we can reserve that for tomorrow. Makes a good Friday edition. I'll give myself a note about that one. When I saw the news, it was just social media reports of the fact that the ethics committee was going to have a release soon. And I was waiting for the actual news reports to be generated from it. Those are probably out there now, and I can collect those and share those with you tomorrow. So this is interesting. The next section of this long piece, which we'll now not get all the way through, is titled Language, a Key Mechanism of Control for a Conspiratorial Age. But it's interesting because it harkens back, does he mention this somewhere? Yes, we'll get to it in paragraph 2 of this section. You'll see why this, raised an eyebrow. One of the most influential Republican operatives of recent years, Chris Rufo, built his career by popularizing CRT and groomer as smears. In building his personal brand, Rufo is explicit about the centrality of manipulating language and branding ideas. We have decodified the term and will recodify it to annex the entire range of cultural constructions that are unpopular with Americans. Well, that's the idea of just defining CRT as something other than it actually is. And what will it be? It'll be all, the sum of all bad things that culture warriors hate. Well, it feels like conservative politics is increasingly centered on these linguistic misdirections. And if that does feel that way to you, it's worth remembering Newt Gingrich's 1996 memo entitled Language, a Key Mechanism of Control. That was the eyebrow that went up. Newt explained to his Republican colleagues the words to routinely employ to contrast with their opponents. And it's a bullet list of words that sound terrible that you should be using when you describe Democrats if you are a Newt Gingrich Republican. Abuse of power, whatever it is, anti-flag, anti-family, anti-child, anti-jobs, betray, bizarre, bosses, bureaucracy, cheat, coercion, compassion is not enough, collapsing, consequences, corruption, criminal rights, crisis, on and on. A list of words that aren't necessarily actually in widespread usage by Democrats or that could be hung on them for whatever reason. It's just negative words that are just negative in their own right, and we'll just use them when we talk about Democrats. That was the idea. So it is what we're seeing now, the same old thing. New wine in old bottles. A 2023 edition of the Gingrich memo would expand the lexicon to include terms like deep state, social justice warriors, groomers, CRT, woke, and now weaponize. This reveals that the new linguistic attacks reflect the changing nature of the Republican Party, centered less on traditional conservative ideas and more on an anti-state conspiratorial version of populism. Now, how that trope became a congressional subcommittee. The idea of weaponization is not new. You can find the term in past Fox coverage. For example, journalist Matt Gertz, not to be confused, and actually reads this right in the text. It says, not to be confused with the aforementioned Matt Gaetz, even though we did it already. I hadn't read the warning yet, you see. Took a look at the prominence of weaponization on Fox News. It turns up, for example, Sean Hannity in 2017 saying, we now have proof that the intelligence wasn't the only powerful government entity that was weaponized by the Obama administration, but it is an episodic rather than constant theme. And Matt Gertz's tweet about it is embedded here. Weaponization, of course, implies a martial aspect. It is similar to the linguistic trick of calling the Biden administration the Biden regime to evoke an illiberal approach to governing. It carries the whiff of a rogue state, implementing Stasi-like operations to suppress dissent. Federal agencies have a long and sordid history of illegally targeting American citizens to gain political advantage. Government agencies, like but not limited to the FBI, DHS, and DOJ, are actively working to silence and suppress citizens who subscribe to ideas that differ from the regimes, says the Center for Renewing America. You probably have not heard of the Center for Renewing America. Well, maybe you have. But he thinks his readers haven't. But it offers an important insight into both the origins and meaning of the weaponization trope. The Center for Renewing is a Trump-aligned think tank. As best as I can tell, the center promoted the idea of weaponization committees in the form it has now taken before anyone else. Last October, characterizing it as a church-style committee, which is an abomination to say that, the center stated, we call on members of Congress to assemble a standalone committee with broad investigative powers focused on woke and weaponized agencies, two fake things, and personnel within the federal government. GOP hardliners who opposed Kevin McCarthy's leadership bid used similar terminology when they successfully demanded an December 8th letter that McCarthy form a church commission-style committee to target weaponized government. And he did, and he bent to their wishes, and they screwed him over and got rid of him nonetheless. Isn't that great? The Center for Renewing America was led by Russ Vought. Remember, I told you this would be somehow relevant to the actual news of the day. We've just been talking about that guy, and he was just featured on, that episode of Last Week Tonight, which should be fully available at some point today on YouTube, in case you missed that episode and don't have HBO. But the Center for Renewing America is led by Russ Vought, a Christian nationalist and former head of Trump's budget office. I want to focus on Vought. Well, he would if we had more time to read about it, but because he has not just helped popularize the weaponization trope, he's been using this language since at least 2021, but he also embodies its intent and hypocrisies. Vought is an extreme partisan who, when given the chance to govern, damaged the institutions of government. He weaponized government in the worst ways while in power. Some examples provided here. As OMB chief, Vought pushed the Schedule F executive order that would have made it possible to fire career employees for political reasons. Vought okayed the withholding of aid to Ukraine, even though his career OMB lawyers warned him it was illegal. And weeks after it was clear that Trump had lost the election, Vought blocked career officials from cooperating with the Biden administration at a crucial moment during the pandemic. This prompted Dana Milbank, the dick whisperer, to write a lacerating but accurate profile saying what Russ Vought is very good at is sabotage. He's sabotaging national security, the pandemic response, and the economic recovery, all to make things more difficult for the incoming Biden administration.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
He sabotaged, of course, the transition between the two administrations, right? So that is Vought when working in government. When he's out of power, Vought characterized legitimate use of government power as weaponization. It goes on and on. There's more to discuss about this, and luckily we have Friday yet to come in order to do it. Stay tuned now for the rest of your Netroots Radio programming day.